Hello, this is Miss Serratus, and we are looking now. We're still in 2.1, but we are looking at the pressure sensor. And if you're following along in your online textbook, that's number 25. And the pressure sensor is actually the first sensor, physical sensor, that you have to actually attach to the microbit in order to make it work. But before we get into the code and all the things to make the pressure sensor work, little piece of information that you need to know is the difference between an analog and a digital input. And the main difference, it's the way that the sensor actually puts electricity into the microbit. And that'll determine if it's digital or analog. If something is digital, then that means that it's basically an on or an off, which you will soon learn that's a 1 or a 0, which I don't want to confuse you right now. And if it's analog, then it's a range of values that you will be using in order to get that sensor to work. So digital sensors are a simple on or off to make it work. Analog sensors require a value. And in most cases, you're going to have to add an if-then block, which is a conditional statement, in order to have them work. So let's move on to the pressure sensor. And the pressure sensor actually measures force that is applied to this part of the pressure sensor. I do find that sometimes it's sensitive. You might just sometimes touch this area and you'll be able to get it to work. This cute little short video will show you how to attach the pressure sensor to your microbit. You'll notice here you have to use the jumper wires. You'll be putting it over here. Though you need two of them, the colors do not matter. One of them will be applied in either pin 0, pin 1, or pin 2, depending on the code. And the other one will always go to the 3 volt. So that's how you attach it. And then you're probably like, what do you mean by pin 1, pin 2, pin 0? I will talk about that in a moment. But before we actually get to start coding the pressure sensor, you have to determine what value will make the pressure sensor actually respond. And each pressure sensor is sensitive to force, and it's different, is what I mean to say. Each pressure sensor is different to the force that makes it respond. And so what you need to do is you have to test your pressure sensor. And the way that you do it is by building this quick code, and you put in a forever block, and you want to get these blocks set value to analog read pin 1. This one's set to pin 1, and show number value. So what this code is actually saying is we want to find out what is the value or the number when we apply pressure to the analog device that is attached to pin 1. That's a lot of information. I understand that. So the pressure sensor is an analog device. And the reason why I know it's an analog device is because it works by adding numbers to it. It's not a simple on or off. And the number that's going to cause the pressure sensor to work is different for everybody because every pressure sensor is slightly different. Generally speaking, the most people can get the pressure sensor to work with a value of about 350. Um, some kids need more, some kids need less. But with just basic pressure, 350, maybe 325, maybe 375, that's the general range. But this is the code that you would use to test your pressure sensor. So the first thing I want you to do is go ahead and build this code. And when you're done building it, please call it analog value. Just analog value is what you want to call it. And this is the same piece of code that you're going to use for other sensors. So build this code, save this code, and come on back. Welcome back. Now that you've built this code, we need to figure out what is the value for your pressure sensor. So you want to go ahead, grab a pressure sensor if you don't have one. Make sure you have 2 of the jumper wires, and you want to put one of the wires into the 3 volt, and the other one, if you built this code exactly like this, you're going to put it under P1 or pin 1. Now, if you change the code to pin 0, then you need to connect it to pin 0. If you change it to pin 2, you need to connect it to pin 2. But if you wrote the code just like this, connect it to pin 1. Once you do that, I want you to answer 3 questions. What number do you get when you don't touch the pressure sensor at all? What value do you get? Once you get that number, type it in this spot. Then I want you just to apply a little bit of pressure. And when I'm talking about applying pressure, I'm referring to this part of the pressure sensor. And what value or number does your microbit read when you put a little bit of pressure? And type that in here. And last but not least, go ahead and put full pressure. And what number do you get? And type that in here. So that's the first part of the pressure sensor, is becoming familiar with the range of values between not touching it a little bit, and touching it a lot. When you are completed this part of the assignment, I need you to use your snipping tool and go ahead and take a screenshot. So just a reminder, this is your snipping tool. Just go ahead to new. And then, of course, when you take the screenshot, there should be some numbers. When you go ahead and save it, make sure you pay attention to where it's being saved. Mine's being saved under pictures. You can change the name of it and add that, and that'll be part 1 of the pressure sensor assignment. And you need to watch the second video in order to complete part 2. Come on back to part 2.